When I first saw him, my breath caught in my throat, because I knew this wasn't an accident. I was winding up that mountain road, tires crunching through the snow, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the flurries, the kind of cold that crawls under your skin and stays there. It was late winter, the time when even the trees look starved, stripped bare by months of frost. I remember thinking how silent it was, no birds, no movement, just me and the endless white. And then, I saw him, a wolf, standing on the side of the road, maybe 20 yards ahead. At first glance, he looked like every nightmare they tell you about wild country. Gray fur, sharp lines, a silhouette against the snow. I gripped the wheel tighter, heart pounding. Out here, a wolf means danger. That's what I believed my whole life. But then I looked closer. His ribs were showing, every bone sharp as broken glass under that ragged coat. He wasn't standing proud like a predator. He was slumped, hollow. His legs looked like they could give out any second. And his eyes, God, those eyes weren't hunting. They weren't angry. They were pleading, like a man begging for one more chance. I slowed the truck without thinking. He didn't move, didn't growl, didn't run, just stared, like he'd been waiting for me. My stomach tightened. This wasn't normal. Wolves don't just stand there and look at you like that. I cracked the window, breath fogging up the glass. The air was so sharp it hurt to breathe. My lunch was sitting on the seat beside me, half a sandwich, nothing special. And for reasons I still can't explain, I reached over, unwrapped it, and tossed a piece out into the snow. It landed a few feet from him with a soft thud. I expected him to lunge for it, or bolt into the trees. That's what wild animals do, but he didn't. He just lowered his head, slow, like he was ashamed, like taking food from me was some kind of defeat. And then, with this heartbreaking caution, he stepped forward and sniffed it. I swear I heard my own heartbeat over the wind. He didn't rip into it, didn't snarl or fight. He just ate, like someone who hadn't had a meal in weeks, maybe months. Every bite careful, every glance flicking back to me, like he was afraid I'd change my mind. And then, just as silently as he appeared, he turned and walked back toward the tree line. No sound, no threat, just a shadow melting into the snow. I sat there gripping the wheel, staring at the empty roadside, wondering what the hell just happened. I thought that was the last I'd ever see of him, but the mountains don't forget kindness. He didn't look at me like a predator. He looked at me like a man begging for a second chance. I couldn't stop thinking about those eyes. All night, they haunted me, hollow, burning, asking for something I didn't know how to give. I told myself it was crazy, that it was just an animal, that I should forget it and move on. But the truth? I couldn't. The next day, I loaded the truck with whatever scraps I could find. Raw meat, bones from last night's dinner, even a few hunks of bread. It felt like I was breaking some unwritten law, like I was crossing into a place I didn't belong. But I drove back up that winding road anyway, heart pounding harder with every turn. Snow was falling again when I spotted him. Same place, same stance, like he'd been waiting. When our eyes met, something twisted in my chest. He didn't run, didn't flinch, just stood there, ribs sharp against his fur, as if the cold couldn't bite any harder than hunger already had. I killed the engine, stepped out, boots crunching into the snow. The air hit me like a blade, sharp, merciless. My breath turned white as smoke as I reached for the bag of meat. "Here," I said softly, my voice almost lost to the wind. "I brought you something." He tilted his head, one ear flicking like he understood me. I tossed a chunk into the snow. It landed between us, dark against the white. He moved, slow as a shadow, eyes never leaving mine. Every step was a question. He sniffed the meat, then looked back at me, and I swear, there was hesitation, like he wanted permission. Then he ate, careful and silent, and retreated just far enough to watch me. and that became our ritual. Day after day, I came back, sometimes with scraps from my kitchen, sometimes with meat from the butcher. Every time, he was there, always waiting, always watching, and every time I talked to him, not because I thought he understood, but because it felt wrong to feed something so wild in silence. I told him things I hadn't told another soul, about the loneliness that crept in since my wife left, about how the house felt empty when the snow came, about how I didn't know why I cared so much whether he lived or died. He never answered, of course, just listened. And then came the day everything changed. It was colder than usual, the wind slicing through my coat. I set the meat down and turned, expecting him to eat like always. But when I looked back, he wasn't at the food. He was coming toward me. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to run. This was still a wolf, wild and powerful, even starved. But I froze, heart pounding like a drum in my ears. He walked right up to me, close enough that I could see the frost on his whiskers, and lowered his head to my boots. Just sniffed, slow, cautious. Then he stepped back, silent as the snow. No growl, no teeth, just that same burning gaze, softer now. He could have attacked. Instead, he just looked at me, and in that look, there was something like gratitude. And then, just like that, he turned and vanished into the trees, leaving me standing there with shaking hands and a heart that felt too big for my chest. That day, I thought we'd reached the peak of trust. But trust is tested in storms. The third week was when everything changed. By then, our ritual had become almost normal. I'd pull up, kill the engine, and find him there, waiting. He was stronger now, his coat a little thicker, his eyes brighter. I told myself I was doing a good thing, that maybe, just maybe, he had a chance. That day, I had fresh meat. The sky was heavy, clouds like bruises hanging low over the mountains, but I didn't think much of it. I stepped out into the snow, the cold biting harder than usual, and whistled softly like I always did. But he wasn't there. I set the meat down, called out again, my breath curling into the still air. Nothing, just the whisper of wind through the pines. For the first time, I felt uneasy. Then I heard it, a sound from the trees. Not a growl, not a howl. A low, restless whimper that sent a chill crawling up my spine. He appeared a moment later, bursting out of the shadows like something was chasing him. His chest was heaving, his fur slicked with frost, eyes wide and wild. But it wasn't hunger I saw in them this time. It was something else. He didn't go for the food. He didn't even glance at it. Instead, he started pacing, back and forth, circling, his breath steaming in the freezing air. Every muscle in his body looked wired tight, like a coiled spring about to snap. I froze, watching him, my heartbeat loud in my ears. "What is it?" I whispered, my voice breaking in the silence. "What's wrong?" He stopped suddenly and stared at me, dead still. That stare hit me like a punch. Then his head snapped toward the tree line. His ears shot forward. Every hair on my neck stood on end. And then I heard it too, a groan, deep and low, echoing from the mountain itself, like the earth was shifting. The sky above rumbled, dark and heavy, and in the distance the wind began to howl, a sound that made the pines shiver. A storm was coming. But the way he moved, the urgency, the tension, it felt like more than that. He wasn't warning me about snow. There was something else out there, something I couldn't see. He trotted toward the trees, then stopped, turned back, and locked eyes with me again. That look made my blood run cold. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking behind me, and that look made my blood run cold. For a split second, I thought I saw a shadow move through the pines. Big, silent, gone before I could breathe. My throat tightened. I stepped back, clutching the truck door. "What the hell?" He let out a low, urgent growl, not at me, but at whatever was lurking beyond. Then he turned, bolted into the woods, and vanished like smoke in the wind. I stood there in the falling snow, shaking, heart pounding so hard it hurt. I thought he was just hungry. I didn't know he was trying to save my life. The storm didn't just come, it exploded. One moment, the sky was gray and heavy. The next, it was a wall of white fury crashing down on the mountain. Snow whipped across the windshield like shards of glass. My wipers thrashed back and forth, but it was useless. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, tires crunching through the slush. My gut told me to turn back, but the road behind me was gone, swallowed by snow. Then came the sound, a low rumble that rose into a howl as the wind slammed against the truck, rocking it on the icy pavement. And then, the tires spun. "Come on," I muttered, slamming the gas. Nothing. The truck lurched, groaned, and sank deeper. I tried reverse, forward, anything. But all I heard was the sickening whine of rubber on ice. That's when the reality hit me like a punch. I wasn't going anywhere. I killed the engine and sat there, breath fogging up the glass, heart pounding against my ribs. My phone had no signal, no headlights in the distance. Just white, endless, merciless white. The temperature dropped fast. My fingers ached, stiff and useless as I pulled my coat tighter. The wind howled like something alive, shrieking through the pines. Every instinct screamed the same thing. If I stay here, I die. I shoved the door open, nearly ripped from its hinges by the wind, and stumbled out into the storm. Snow stung my face like needles. Within seconds, I was soaked to the bone, teeth rattling as I tried to breathe through the freezing air. And then, through the blinding white, I saw movement, a shadow, low, steady, cutting through the storm like it owned it. My heart stopped. The wolf. He stood a few yards away, his coat dusted in frost, eyes burning like embers in the snowstorm. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other through the chaos. And then, he turned, walked a few steps, stopped, looked back. He walked ahead, then looked back, as if saying, "Follow me if you want to live." Every part of me knew this was insane. Following a wolf into the wilderness? It sounded like a death sentence. But something deeper, something I can't explain, told me to trust him. So I did. I stumbled after him, boots sinking into drifts that swallowed my legs. The wind roared, erasing every trace of the road, every sign of safety. But the wolf never faltered. He moved with purpose, circling back every few yards to make sure I was still there. Minutes stretched into an eternity. My lungs burned. My muscles screamed. I thought about collapsing right there in the snow, just letting it end. But every time I slowed, he stopped too, waiting, watching. And then I saw it, a dark slit in the white, a cave hidden in the mountainside, its mouth gaping like salvation. I stumbled inside and collapsed onto the frozen ground, gasping for air as the wind screamed outside. The wolf followed, silent as a ghost, and sat a few feet away, his breath curling in the dim light. Relief hit me like a tidal wave. I was alive. I was safe. I thought the cave was the end of the nightmare. But what waited inside, it changed everything. The cave was dark, colder than I imagined, the walls slick with ice that caught what little light bled in from the storm outside. My breath echoed in the silence, ragged and harsh. I pressed my back to the stone, chest heaving, trying to convince myself I'd made it, that I was safe. Then I saw them, 2 pinpricks of light, then 4, then 6, eyes, glowing, unblinking, deep inside the black. My blood turned to ice, shapes began to emerge, low, silent shadows sliding across the cave floor. Wolves, 3, 4, maybe more. They moved with that slow, terrifying grace predators have when they know there's no escape. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind screamed for me to run, but my legs were stone. This was it. After everything, the feeding, the trust, the storm. I was about to die in the dark. The wolf, the one I'd been feeding, the one who led me here, stood a few feet in front of me, his body rigid, ears flat. He didn't back away. He didn't look at them like family. He looked at them like a threat. One of the wolves crept closer, lips curling back to reveal teeth that flashed in the dim light. A low growl rumbled through the cave, vibrating in my bones. And then it happened. The starving wolf, my wolf, snapped forward with a snarl so savage it shook the walls. He planted himself between me and them, his body a shield, teeth bared, eyes burning. The other wolves froze, startled by his fury. One lunged, and he hit it like a thunderclap, sending it sprawling across the ice. The cave exploded with sound, snarls, yelps, the scrape of claws on stone. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering, hands shaking so hard I could barely hold on to myself. And then, silence. One by one, the other wolves backed away, tails low, growls fading as they melted into the darkness, swallowed by the cave. I just stared, breathless, disbelieving. My wolf, skin and bone just weeks ago, stood tall, chest heaving, fur bristling, like a soldier guarding his post. He turned his head then, slowly, and looked at me, and I swear to God, there was no hunger in that look, no wild rage, just something I still can't name. He didn't have to do that. He could have walked away, left me to them, but he didn't. He fought for me, against his own kind. In that moment, I knew I wasn't just a stranger. I was under his protection. I sank to the ground, trembling, trying to process what just happened. I thought I was safe now, but nature had one last trial for both of us. The storm raged outside like the mountain was tearing itself apart. Wind howled through the cave mouth, flinging snow inside in wild bursts. The cold was merciless. It crawled under my clothes, into my bones, into my soul. My body shook uncontrollably, teeth chattering so hard it hurt. I huddled in the dark, hugging my knees, watching him, the wolf, standing just a few feet away. He was still as stone, eyes glowing faintly in the shadows, his breath curling like smoke. For the first time since this all began, I wondered if he'd leave me now. But then, he moved. Slow, deliberate steps on the frozen ground. My breath caught as he came closer, closer, until I could see the frost on his fur and the scars etched into his lean body. He lowered himself, not in a crouch, not like a predator, but in something softer. He lay down beside me, close enough that his fur brushed my arm, and then he stayed. I don't know how long I sat there frozen, too stunned to move. His warmth seeped through my coat, a living heat against the bitter cold. My shaking slowed, my breathing eased, and for the first time that night, I believed I might live. Hours crawled by in silence, broken only by the storm's fury outside and the steady rhythm of his breath. I turned my head, looked at him, and something inside me cracked wide open. All my life, I thought survival was about strength, about weapons, about fighting harder than what wants to kill you. But lying there, with this wild creature pressed against me, I realized I was wrong. Survival, real survival, comes from trust, from connection. My throat burned as I whispered into the darkness, words I never thought I'd say to a wolf. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice raw. "I don't know why you're doing this, but I swear, I'll never forget." He shifted slightly, the weight of his body settling against mine, and in that moment, I felt it, the steady thud of his heartbeat, strong and relentless, echoing through his chest and into me. I felt his heartbeat against mine, and I understood. We were both just fighting to live. I lay there with tears freezing on my lashes, listening to the storm scream outside, feeling that wild pulse beside me. I thought the storm would take the longest night of my life, But dawn brought something that broke me to tears. When I opened my eyes, the world was white and silent. The storm had passed, leaving a pale light that spilled into the cave like liquid silver. My breath still hung in the cold air, but it didn't feel deadly anymore. I moved slowly, every muscle aching, and turned to where he lay. The wolf was awake, sitting now, watching me with those eyes I'd come to know so well, eyes that didn't belong to a mindless predator, but to something older, wiser. I pushed myself up, legs stiff and clumsy, and stepped toward the mouth of the cave. Outside, the mountain glittered like glass, every tree bent under the weight of ice. The road was gone, erased by drifts taller than a man. But the sky was clear. I could make it down, I told myself. If I moved now, I might survive. I turned back to him. "Come on," I whispered. My voice cracked in the silence. "Let's go." But he didn't move. He just sat there, staring at me. And for the first time since this began, I saw something in his eyes that tore me apart. Not hunger, not fear, something heavier, like he knew something I didn't. Then he rose to his feet, and I noticed the limp, a deep drag in his back leg. Blood had dried along his fur, hidden in the shadows of the night. He'd fought harder than I realized. For me. I opened my mouth to speak, but before a word left my lips, he turned and walked out into the blinding snow. "Wait!" I stumbled after him, boots crunching through the ice. He didn't stop, didn't look back. He climbed higher, toward the ridge above the cave, his body a gray silhouette against the white. When he reached the top, he lifted his head and howled. The sound split the air, low, raw, echoing through the mountains like a cry torn from the earth itself. And then, movement. From the trees below, a shape emerged. A deer, thin, trembling, one leg twisted at an unnatural angle. It limped through the drifts, drawn by the wolf's call, like prey answering a summons it couldn't resist. I froze, my chest constricted as the truth hit me like a hammer. He could have killed me that first night. He could have ripped me apart in the cave when hunger burned brightest. But he didn't. He chose not to. And now, after everything, he was choosing again. Not to follow me, not to stay, but to lead his pack back to life. I stood there with tears stinging my eyes, the cold forgotten, my breath breaking in the silence. He gave me my life, and then he just turned and vanished into the snow. I thought I'd never see him again, but the mountain wasn't done teaching me. Years passed before I saw those mountains again. Life had moved on. New job, new town, a different rhythm. But a part of me never left that cave. Winter after winter, I'd catch myself staring out at the first snow and feeling that same quiet weight in my chest. People asked why I never hunted again. I just told them, the mountains taught me enough. One February, I drove back. I told myself it was just to see the old roads, to feel the silence of the high country one more time. But deep down, I think I was chasing a ghost. The road was the same, narrow, winding, carved into the side of a world that doesn't care if you live or die. Snow crunched under my boots as I stepped out and started walking toward the ridge. The cold hit me like an old friend, sharp and biting. The air was so still it felt sacred. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks, a shape on the ridge, barely more than a shadow against the endless white. But then he moved, lifting his head with that same quiet strength, his fur rippling in the wind. My breath caught in my throat. A wolf. Not just any wolf. Him. Older now. Bigger. His coat thick and silvered by the years, but unmistakable. And then I saw it. The scar along his flank, jagged and pale against the gray. The one he earned the night he stood between me and death. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in the snow, staring up at him. The world fell away, the wind, the cold, the years between us. There was only that ridge, That wolf and those eyes, eyes that still burned like fire in the heart of winter. He didn't move at first, just watched me, and in that silent gaze, I felt everything: gratitude, strength, something that went beyond words, something that didn't need them. Then, he howled, one long, low note that rolled through the mountains like thunder, shivering through my bones, echoing across the years like a promise kept. And then he was gone, just like before, silent as snowfall, melting into the trees. I stood there with tears freezing on my face, my breath shaking like a prayer I couldn't finish. I whispered the only words I had left. "Thank you." He remembered me. After all those years, he remembered. I stood there for a long time after he vanished, staring at that empty ridge like if I just waited long enough, he'd come back. The wind cut across the snow, the mountains silent except for the echo of that one last howl still humming in my bones. And then, slowly, I turned, back toward the camera, back toward you. If I told you a wolf saved my life, you'd call me a liar. If I told you he chose mercy over hunger, that he stood against his own to protect me, you'd laugh, shake your head, tell me it's a story I made up, but I know what I saw, and I'll spend the rest of my life believing that somewhere out there, a wild heart still beats, for me, not because of fear, not because of dominance, but because of something stronger, not a bullet, not a fist, words, the quiet words I spoke in the dark that night. Thank you. I'll never forget. Maybe he didn't understand the language, but he understood the truth in them. Gratitude, respect. Those words saved me more than any weapon ever could. I walked down the mountain with that truth burning in my chest like a brand. You don't conquer the wild by force. You earn your place in it, with trust. So if you've ever felt nature speak to you, write this in the comments. Animals remember kindness. And if your heart is racing right now, you understand. Subscribe for more true stories from the wild. Because out there, beyond the reach of roads and reason, there are moments that change everything. Moments you can't explain. Moments that remind us we're not as different as we think. When I first saw the wolf standing by the grave, my heart froze because I realized this wasn't an accident. It was a gray morning, the kind that presses on your chest and makes the world feel smaller, heavier. The dirt road to the cemetery was muddy from last night's rain, and the trees were black skeletons against a pale sky. I walked behind the others, head down, clutching my coat tighter as if it could keep out the weight of grief. The air smelled like wet earth and sorrow. No one spoke loudly, just murmurs, broken whispers, the sound of boots sinking into soft ground. A crow called somewhere far away, sharp and lonely. It felt like the whole forest was watching us. We were there to bury a man everyone in the village knew. He wasn't family to me, not by blood, but I respected him. He was one of those people who understood the land, who lived with it, not against it. They said he died quietly in his sleep. Maybe that's true. But the look on people's faces told me this death was heavier than most. I was lost in that thought when I saw it. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Through the crooked line of birch trees, beyond the last row of wooden crosses, something stood still, like a shadow too solid for morning mist. Then it moved, just enough for the shape to come alive. A wolf, not a dog, not a stray, a wolf. Tall, gray, with fur that seemed to drink in the weak sunlight. It stood at the very edge of the cemetery, where the wild grass met the old wooden fence. Its head was high, ears pricked forward, eyes locked on us. No growling, no snarling, just watching. I stopped walking. My throat went dry. Wolves don't come this close. Not here. Not in daylight. I glanced at the others, expecting someone to shout, to grab a stick, to do something, but no one had noticed yet. Or maybe they saw and pretended not to. The last thing anyone wanted was panic at a funeral. For a moment, I told myself it was hungry. Maybe it smelled food, or maybe the scent of death pulled it in. Animals do that, don't they? I thought any second now it would turn and vanish into the trees, just a wild thing passing through. But it didn't move. The priest began his prayer, voice low and trembling. People crossed themselves, their lips moving with the old words. I couldn't take my eyes off the wolf. It didn't blink, didn't flinch. Its tail hung low, not tense like an animal ready to strike, more like submission, respect. I tried to shake the thought. It's just a wolf, just an animal. But then something happened that made the hair on my arms rise like static. The wolf lowered its head, slowly, deliberately, not in fear, not like prey, like reverence. It held that bow for a moment, still as stone. My breath caught in my throat. My chest felt tight. It wasn't just looking. It was grieving. I know how crazy that sounds. Believe me, I didn't want to believe it either. My mind fought it, searched for any other explanation. Maybe it smelled something in the grass. Maybe its neck was tired. But no, there was something in the way it moved, in the silence that wrapped around us when it did. And then, as if the forest itself wanted to prove me wrong, the wind died. The trees stopped whispering. Even the crow that had been crying all morning fell silent. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, thudding in my ears. For a moment, I forgot where I was, forgot the people around me. It was just me and that wolf across the field, two creatures staring at each other over a fresh grave. And in its eyes, God help me, there was no hunger there, no rage, just something deep and still and impossibly human. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember moving. All I remember is thinking, this can't be real. And yet it was. The priest's voice broke the spell for a second, calling us back to the words of the living. I glanced around. Some others had noticed now. A murmur spread, soft as grass in the wind. Heads turned, fingers pointed. No one spoke loud. It was as if we were all afraid to break whatever this was. I thought, this is it. Someone will shout. Someone will scare it away. But no one did. The wolf stayed, head lowered, body still, as if it understood every word of the prayer, as if it came here with a purpose. And in that moment, deep in my bones, I felt something I can't explain, something bigger than fear, bigger than grief. It wasn't guarding itself, it was guarding him. I wasn't the only one staring anymore. The whispers started soft, like wind rustling dry leaves. First 2 voices, then 5, then the whole line of mourners buzzing with words no one wanted to say too loud. Wolves never do this. It's a bad sign. And then someone murmured something that made my blood run cold. They say wolves don't forget kindness. The phrase hit me like a blow. For a second, I didn't understand. Then my mind dragged out an old story, one I'd almost forgotten. The man we were burying, he was no ordinary villager. He had a past that people spoke about only in winter, by firesides, when the night was long. Years ago, they said, he found a wolf caught in a steel trap. Not just a pup, a full-grown beast, wounded and half-mad with pain. Most hunters would have shot it, quick and clean. But not him. He freed it. I remember him laughing about it once, shrugging like it was nothing. What kind of man leaves a creature to die screaming in the snow? He said. But his eyes told me it was more than that. And now there was a wolf standing at his grave. I tried to breathe, tried to tell myself it was coincidence, a trick of fate, an animal drawn by smell. But then the wolf moved, not away, not back into the safety of the forest. Closer, one slow step, then another. Mud squelched under its paws, dark against the frost-laced ground. My stomach knotted so hard I thought I might be sick. The people around me stiffened, their murmurs snapping into sharp breaths. I felt every instinct screaming, run, climb, hide, but my legs stayed frozen, as if the earth had swallowed them whole. The wolf stopped maybe 20 feet away. Its body was lean, scarred in places, muscles sliding under thick gray fur like coiled rope. Its breath steamed in the cold, ghostly against the stillness of the cemetery. And then, its eyes found mine. God help me, I couldn't look away. Golden, bright as fire yet deeper than night. There was no wild frenzy there, no hunger, just something I couldn't name, something that reached straight past my skin, my ribs, into the softest part of me, and clenched. Fear shot through me first, sharp as a blade, but then something shifted. A calm I didn't trust settled over me, heavy and strange, like a blanket thrown across raw nerves. My hands stopped trembling, my throat loosened, and then the chills hit, not from cold, from knowing. It sees me. It knows I see it. The priest's voice wavered. His words faltered like a candle flame before a gust, and that's when it happened. Someone broke. "Hey, get out!" a man roared, his voice cracking like a rifle shot. I flinched so hard it hurt. The sound ripped through the spell, jagged and wrong against the soft hum of morning. The wolf didn't flinch. It didn't even blink. The man shouted again, louder this time, lifting his arms like a scarecrow, his boots crunching forward. The old women gasped, clutching their scarves, crossing themselves so fast their fingers blurred. My heart slammed into my ribs. This is it, I thought. This is where the blood hits the snow. But the wolf didn't move, not an inch. It just stood there, calm as stone, eyes steady on us, on me, maybe, as if that shout was nothing more than a leaf falling. I felt my breath hitch, sharp and shallow. And then slowly, so slowly, I almost missed it. The wolf bent its legs and lowered its body to the ground, not in fear, not in defeat. It sat, like a sentry at its post. The man who had shouted stopped dead, his arms sagging like broken branches. Around us, the whispers swelled again, soft, awed, terrified. No one moved, no one dared, because deep down, every single one of us felt it, the truth hanging heavy in that frozen air. The wolf wasn't guarding itself, it was guarding him. The coffin creaked as the ropes tightened, lowering him into the ground. The sound carved through the stillness like a knife through ice. People shifted their weight, boots grinding against gravel, breaths fogging in the cold morning air. But the wolf didn't move. It stayed where it was, 20 feet away, body carved in gray stone, golden eyes burning in the muted light. No growl, no snarl, not even a twitch of its ears, just silence. So heavy it made the priest's words sound thin, fragile, like paper tearing in a storm. The prayers rolled over us, low and trembling, but I barely heard them. My eyes were locked on the beast beyond the fence, and for a moment, I swear I forgot why we were even there. He lay in that wooden box, a man who once walked these same woods, who once laughed and cursed and carried life in his hands, and now he was going back to the earth, and the only creature that seemed to truly understand what that meant was not human. Someone near me whispered, voice cracking, "It's still watching." Of course it was. Head high at first, gaze steady. Then, as the ropes hissed and the coffin touched the bottom of the grave, its head sank lower, not jerky, not nervous, slow, deliberate, like a bow. My throat tightened. A sting pricked behind my eyes. No one dared speak now. The silence wrapped around us all, binding us tighter than any prayer could. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shimmer on the wolf's fur, a glint from the pale sun. But no, it caught again and again, sliding down the coarse gray hair just beneath its eye. My breath stalled in my chest. A tear. God help me. The wolf was crying. The woman next to me gasped so sharply it sounded like a sob. Is it crying?" she whispered, her words barely air. Heads turned, necks craned, everyone straining to see, to believe. And I had to know. Before my fear could stop me, my boots were crunching over the frost-hardened earth. One step, then another. The cold bit through my coat, but I didn't feel it. My pulse thudded so loud it drowned out everything. The whispers, the wind, the priest's last words. Closer, 10 feet now. The wolf didn't move, didn't flick an ear, didn't break the stare it held on that open grave. And then I saw it, clear as breath on glass. Moisture clung to its fur in a trail so clean, so sharp it could only be one thing. Not dew, not melting frost. Tears, real tears cutting paths through the dirt and dust on its face. My knees went weak. I gripped the wooden fence post to keep from folding right there. A wild animal, a predator, weeping for a man. I didn't dare speak, didn't dare breathe too loud, because deep down, I felt it. This wasn't something meant for words. Behind me, the last clods of earth fell heavy on the coffin. The hollow thud throbbed in the air like a slow drumbeat. People began stepping back, murmuring prayers under their breath, crossing themselves as if to shield their souls from what they'd seen. I thought that was the last strange thing we'd see. I thought the wolf would vanish into the woods the second we turned our backs. But I was wrong. When the priest closed his book and the first mourners drifted toward the path, the wolf stayed, unmoving, silent, its body as still as a carved statue, its eyes molten gold against the gray day, locked on that mound of fresh earth like it was guarding a secret no human could understand. And deep inside, where reason lives, a voice whispered what none of us wanted to say out loud: "It's not leaving." The mourners had thinned now, drifting back toward the muddy road in clusters of 2 and 3, whispering like people do when they've seen something they can't explain. But I stayed. I couldn't leave, because the wolf was still there. It hadn't flinched when the last shovelful of dirt thudded on the grave. It hadn't blinked when the prayers ended. It just sat, silent and unyielding, a gray shadow carved into the edge of the world. And then it rose, slow, like a tide swelling against a still shore. The movement froze the air in my lungs. Every muscle in my body coiled tight, ready to snap, run, scream, do something. But my legs betrayed me, rooting me in the damp earth as the wolf stepped forward. One paw, then another. The space between us shrank with each step, the soft pad of its feet barely whispering against the frost-bitten ground. Its fur glistened faintly where tears had traced their path, and somehow that broke me more than its teeth ever could. Nobody dared speak. The few who hadn't left yet stood stiff as gravestones, eyes wide, breath held, as if one sound might shatter the strange thread binding us all. The wolf reached the low wooden fence and didn't stop. It slipped through the gap like smoke, silent, unstoppable. And then, my heart stuttered. Something dangled from its jaws. A strip of brown leather, cracked and torn, edges darkened by time and teeth. At first, I thought it was nothing, a scrap scavenged from some old camp. But then the shape hit me like a hammer. A glove. Not just any glove. I'd seen it before, months ago, clutched in the hand of the man we'd just buried. Thick, weather-worn, made for a hunter's grip. The wolf padded forward, closing the last few feet to the fresh mound of earth. No growl, no rush, just a slow, deliberate walk that made the world tilt on its axis. When it reached the grave, it stopped, lowered its head. The sound of its breath was loud in the silence. Soft, steady puffs of steam curling into the cold air. And then, gently, like laying down something sacred, it opened its jaws. The glove slipped free, landing on the raw soil with a dull thud. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. No one even blinked. The truth hit me so hard I felt my knees weaken. It remembered. The old stories weren't just stories. Wolves never forget kindness. The glove lay there, chewed and worn, the leather scarred by teeth that could have killed but didn't. And now, those same jaws had carried it here, carried it like an offering, like a memory that refused to die. A gasp broke from someone behind me, sharp as a snapped twig. Another voice, trembling, whispered, "Dear God." But the wolf didn't look at us, didn't care about the stares, the fear, the prayers. Its golden eyes stayed on the grave, burning with something I can't put into words, something deeper than instinct, older than time. And for one insane second, I thought that was it. I thought the wolf would snatch the glove back and vanish into the trees, leaving us with nothing but questions and a story too wild to believe. But no, it didn't take it. It left it there, the glove resting on that mound like a crown, like a seal on something none of us could name. Then the wolf stepped back, slow, careful, as if afraid to disturb what it had just done. Its eyes lingered for a moment, not on me, not on the others, on him, the man beneath the soil. And then it turned, not to flee, not to hunt, just to go, each step deliberate, unhurried, as though the forest could wait, because this was the only thing that mattered. I wanted to speak, wanted to tell the world what I had just seen, but my throat locked, and all I could do was watch through the blur of tears that burned hot against the winter air, because I knew what I'd witnessed wasn't hunger, wasn't instinct. It was farewell. It came to say goodbye. The light was dying. The gray sky had deepened into bruised purple, and the last mourners lingered like shadows among the trees. No one spoke. No one could. We just stood there, stiff with something heavier than fear, staring at the fresh mound of earth and at the wolf that would not leave it. Its shape was a silhouette now, carved in black against the dim glow of the horizon, still as a statue, watching, waiting. I don't know why I didn't move. Maybe because leaving felt wrong, like walking away from a secret too big for the world. Or maybe because something deep in my bones whispered that it wasn't over yet. The air turned sharp, biting my lungs with every breath. My fingers ached with cold, but my palms were slick with sweat. I couldn't stop looking at that gray shadow crouched near the grave, its head low, tail still. And then it happened. The wolf raised its head, slowly, like a weight was dragging it upward. The movement sent a ripple through the stillness, the kind that prickles the skin before a storm. Its ears tilted back, its chest swelled, and then came the sound. A howl, long and raw, ripped into the night like something tearing loose from the earth itself. I swear the ground vibrated under my boots. The air seemed to split open, and that sound, it wasn't menace, it wasn't rage, it was grief. Pure, broken grief that poured through every crack in the human heart. It started low, trembling, then rose higher and higher until it wrapped the entire valley in a note so full of pain it felt alive, like a soul screaming, like a prayer no God could ignore. I've heard wolves before, out in the deep woods. Short, sharp calls, cold and wild. This wasn't that. This was a dirge, a funeral song, and God help me, it broke me. The priest dropped his head. One of the old men lifted a trembling hand to his face, and when it came away, it glistened. Tears. Even the wind seemed to choke. That howl carved through my chest, hollowing me out until there was nothing left but the sound and the fire of my own heartbeat. My hands shook so bad I had to lock them together to keep from falling apart. Goosebumps burned across my skin like frostbite. I'd thought I knew what mourning sounded like. I'd heard widows wail and mothers break in hospital halls. But this was older, deeper, a grief that belonged to the earth itself. The wolf held that note until my lungs ached just from listening, and then, slowly, raggedly, it let the sound die into the dark. Silence crashed down so hard it rang in my ears. No one moved. No one dared to breathe too loud. We were all caught in that moment like insects in amber, frozen in the weight of something too big for words. And in my head, a single thought burned like fire. This can't be real. For a second, I believed that was the last thing, the last strange, impossible thing nature had to give. But I was wrong, because the wolf didn't leave. It didn't vanish into the trees like a ghost satisfied with its haunting. It didn't even glance at us. It just lowered its head again, silent now, its breath misting faint in the cold, and settled back onto the earth as if it belonged there. And as the last light bled from the sky, something in the shadows shifted, shapes, faint, flickering, slipping through the trees, so quiet they made no sound at all. I squinted, my heart thudding like a drum in my throat. For a breathless second, I thought my mind was cracking under the weight of everything I'd seen. But no, they were real, and they were coming closer. At first I thought the night was playing tricks on me. Shadows slid between the trees, thin and liquid, like smoke curling through the black. My stomach turned to stone. My breath caught halfway up my throat and stuck there. Eyes. God help me, there were eyes in the dark. Not one pair, not two, dozens. Tiny coals burning low against the underbrush, catching the weak glint of the moon as it climbed over the ridge. The hair on my neck rose so fast it hurt. My fingers went numb. I wanted to shout, to warn the few souls still lingering near the grave, but the words curdled in my mouth before they could form, because I knew what was coming. The forest was empty no more. The pack was here. They moved like water, smooth, soundless, slipping through shadow until the ground seemed to breathe beneath their paws. Shapes grew from the dark, fur rippling silver, shoulders rolling like waves, tails low and steady. Wolves, not one, not three, a dozen at least, maybe more, their bodies melting out of the black like ghosts called by some ancient prayer. And for one blinding, gut-punching second, I thought this was it, the end. They smell the grave, they smell blood. We're done. My pulse jackhammered in my ears, drowning out everything but the hiss of my own breath. My knees wobbled. I tasted iron on my tongue where I'd bitten it without knowing. The first wolf, the one that had never left, lifted its head, not high, not proud, just enough to meet the others in a silence that was heavier than any sound. Then it stepped back, and the newcomers came forward. I braced for chaos, for snarls, teeth, death flashing white in the dim light. I pictured the ground painted red before the prayers had even cooled in the air. But none of that happened. One by one, the wolves closed in, and then they stopped. Not at us, at the grave. They fanned out in a slow arc, then another, until they formed a ring around the mound of fresh earth. Not tight, not tense, loose and perfect, like something practiced long before we were born. And then, as if a single breath moved them all, their heads lowered, every last one of them. No growl, no lunge, no hunger burning in their eyes. Just silence, thick and sacred, wrapping the night like a shroud. I stood frozen, my heart beating in my throat so loud I swore it echoed through the trees. My mind clawed for sense, for logic, for anything human enough to explain this, and came up empty. Because what I was seeing wasn't a hunt. It wasn't dominance. It was a funeral. The kind that made every prayer we'd mumbled hours earlier sound like noise. The wolves bowed their heads, bodies still, tails trailing in the frost, like monks kneeling in prayer. Their breath curled in the cold, little ghosts rising toward a sky gone black with stars. And I couldn't stop shaking. Not from fear now, from something else, something bigger, heavier, older than any word I've ever known. For a long time, none of them moved. The air burned with quiet so deep it rang in my ears. Then, from the far side of the circle, one wolf broke the spell. It was massive, broader in the chest, fur dark as shadow poured over stone. The Alpha. It stepped forward with a grace that made the earth seem soft beneath its paws. Each stride was slow, silent, deliberate, like time itself was bowing to its weight. When it reached the mound, it stopped, lowered its head, and then, so gently I thought I dreamed it, the Alpha touched its nose to the fresh soil. A shiver ran down my spine like lightning. My eyes burned hot, blurring the shape of that great gray beast bowing to a man beneath the earth. It held there a moment, a single heartbeat stretched into forever, then stepped back into the ring without a sound. I thought they'd attack after that, tear the place apart, but no, they stayed, silent, still, watching, like sentinels carved in fur and bone, guarding something sacred no human could claim. And in that frozen night, with a cold moon painting silver across their backs, a truth slammed through me so hard I almost fell. This isn't instinct. This is ritual. And if I'd thought the grave would be empty by morning, I was about to learn how wrong I was. They didn't move. Not for a minute. Not for 10. Long enough for the night to swallow every sound, except the faint hiss of our own breathing. The wolves stood like sentinels carved from shadow and moonlight, their heads bowed, their bodies forming a perfect ring around that grave. My legs ached from standing. My lungs felt too tight, like the cold was searing them from the inside. But I couldn't leave. None of us could. We were prisoners of that moment, bound by something older and heavier than fear. And then, as if a silent command rippled through the dark, the wolves stirred. One by one, they lifted their heads, not jerky, not rushed, slow, reverent, the kind of movement you make when you know you're leaving something sacred behind. The Alpha turned first, padding toward the tree line without a sound. Then the others followed, not scattered, not chaotic, but together, like smoke streaming into the black belly of the forest. Not a single growl, not a single backward glance, just gone, melting into the night as if the earth itself had opened and swallowed them whole. The last one to leave was the gray wolf, the first one, the one that brought the glove. It paused, only for a breath, its golden eyes catching the moon like molten coins. And for a heartbeat, I swear it looked at me. Not through me, at me, and then it was gone. The silence that fell after was worse than any sound. Heavy, crushing, like the weight of a cathedral pressing on your chest. I turned slowly, and that's when I saw the faces around me, wet with tears, raw with awe. Hard men, old women, the priest himself, every one of them undone. No one spoke. What words could live in the shadow of that? I don't remember walking back down that road. I don't remember the mud or the frost biting my boots. All I remember is the ache in my throat, the burn behind my eyes, and the single thought looping like a hymn in my skull. It was as if they came to honor a friend. I thought I'd forget it in time, thought it would blur like a dream, like all the wild stories do when the days stretch long enough. But I never did. And the next morning, I learned why. The sun hadn't fully risen when I found myself back on that dirt road. I don't know what dragged me there. Habit, guilt, hunger for something I couldn't name. Maybe just the need to see the grave in daylight, to prove to myself that last night had really happened, that it wasn't some fever dream born of grief and cold. The cemetery was empty when I arrived. Frost glazed the earth in a brittle sheen, crunching under my boots as I climbed the hill. My breath smoked in the pale dawn, curling like ghosts in the silence. And then I saw it, the glove, still there, still resting on the mound like a crown. But that wasn't what stopped me cold. It was the flowers, fresh, wild, scattered across the grave in a way no human hand would lay them, roots tangled, stems broken like they'd been carried in jaws, not fists, and circling the mound, pressed deep into the damp earth, were prints, not one set, not two, dozens, wolf tracks, big ones, small ones, so many they overlapped into a dark halo that hugged the grave like a wreath. My throat closed, my knees nearly buckled. They came back. After we left, after the world turned its back, they returned. For what? To keep watch? To lay tribute? To grieve the way we do? I don't know. Maybe I never will. All I know is that I dropped to my knees in that frost-stiff grass, my breath breaking in jagged sobs that tore from somewhere too deep to name. Because in that moment, the truth hit like a thunderclap. It wasn't a wolf. It was gratitude. Gratitude older and purer than anything I've ever seen in the eyes of my own kind. I sat there until my fingers went numb, until the sun spilled pale gold across the stones and burned the frost to tears. And when I rose at last, I whispered words no one heard but the ghosts and the trees. I saw it with my own eyes, what most people will never believe. And if you think animals can't love, you're wrong. If you think they don't remember, you're blind. Nature remembers, longer than we do. Sometimes words cut deeper than fists, and sometimes silence heals more than 1,000 apologies. That wolf, that gray shadow of the wild, said more without a sound than any human tongue ever could, and I will carry that silence to my grave. If your heart is full of awe right now, write, nature never forgets. If you believe animals have souls, write, we are not alone in this world.